What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are filming this episode on set within the maze of this gorgeous cypress tree swamp, which is really no shocker. A lot of our videos we've been posting lately have been out here in this swamp slaying some slab crappie, and it's just been a blast. We've caught so many fish, we've filled the freezer up, but today we are taking a break from the fishing action because I wanted to spend some time with y'all and answer some questions that we've been getting down in the comment section of basically every fishing video we've been posting lately. Those questions mainly revolve around the gear that we're using to catch these fish, you know, the rods, the reels, the line, the jigs, jig heads, etc. But also some of the techniques that we are implying to catch these fish. So instead of just, replying to all of those comments and all these different videos, I feel like it'd be best to just make this video here as sort of a resource guide that you can fall back on, or that I can direct you to answer all of these common questions that we're getting about crappie fishing in shallow areas with jigs and bobbers. Of course, you don't have to have a cypress tree swamp to fish, a jig and bobber fish this way. It's very effective in a lot of shallow water areas when you have pieces of cover that you're casting to, or you want to suspend a jig higher up in the water column. But yeah, so with that, I'm going to jump right into a gear breakdown of all the stuff that we've been using out here to catch crappie this fall. If you enjoyed today's video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a thumbs up on it. And if you're new and you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our future wildlife, fishing, and outdoor adventures. So let's jump right into it with the rod and reel. I've got it right here in hand. Let's make sure I don't bang it up against a tree. So, oh shoot, hitting trees. So here is the combo that I've been using to catch the majority of my fish this fall with, and it's very similar to the one that Jay's been using also. So the first thing that stands out, obviously, is this bright green rod. It's almost a chartreuse green color. This is the ACC crappie sticks. They are a really, really high quality crappie fishing brand. They have a ton of different models to choose from even ice fishing all the way up to long jig poles. But we've kind of settled right in the middle. We like to cast for crappie, and we've been using the 6.6 medium powered rod. Using the shorter rod because, as you guys can tell by looking around, there is a lot of overhead cover, a lot of obstacles that we're trying to cast around, and the 6.6 is a little bit more compact, and it makes it easier for us to navigate these tunnels and overhead branches. But if you have more open water, you could bump it up to like, a 7 foot, 7.6, 8 foot. But for us, a 6.6 is just like a really, good all-purpose sized rod for crappie fishing. You can use it open water and in areas like this. If you're in need of a new crappie fishing rod, I really can't recommend these enough. They're super high quality at an affordable price, and like I said, they have a length, size, and action for any crappie fishing application that you could think of. We have a ton of different sizes, but like I said, the 6.6 medium is a really great all-purpose sized rod for, like I said, open water casting, without a bobber, or if we're doing like we're doing out here in the swamp a lot, casting a jig underneath the bobber. So let's move it on down to the reel. Jay and I pretty much use exclusively Shimano reels, which is what we've always used. They're high quality and great. This one in particular that I have on my rod is a Shimano Stratic. It's a 2500 size, just a medium sized reel. You can put a lot of line on it. And it's just really great. I've had this reel for like 7 years now, and it's still working really, really well. Jay, I think, has a Shimano Sahara on hers. It's a little bit more budget friendly, but really, you don't have to have an expensive reel to do this. You can buy a $20, $30, $40 reel and pair it up with your ACC rod or whatever rod you have, and have a good time. Now, another question that I get a lot down in the comment section in these videos relates to our fishing line. So primarily, like 90 to 99% of the time, I'm running braided line on my spinning reels. So this is a 10-pound braid, and there's a lot of reasons why I like to use braid. Number one, it lasts forever. You can work with it for a long time. Like I've had this line on this reel for probably 2 years now, and you don't get that kind of longevity out of monofilament or fluorocarbon. And what's really great about braid is that it's really easy to manage. Like it doesn't tangle up that bad, it's low memory, it casts far, and it's also extremely sensitive. So whenever you're fishing with a jig and bobber, sensitivity is not really a thing, but if you want to take your bobber off in tight line, cast it out and retrieve the jig without a bobber, you can really detect those light strikes. And also, it's really strong. So if you hook up with something big, you can fight that fish back to the boat. And you can also normally pull your jig heads free from snags if you get hung up because it's so strong. Usually bend these light wire hooks out. And then attached to the braided line, I'm always running a leader. A lot of guys just run straight braid, but I just feel like I'm not getting as many bites if I run straight braid, so I like to attach a leader to it. And the leader I have on here most of the time is 6-pound or 8-pound monofilament or fluorocarbon. I don't think it really matters if you're using mono or fluoro. This is 6 pound. A couple of my favorite leader lines that I like to use are Berkeley Trilene Sensation. That's a monofilament. It's really, really strong. I really like it. It's like almost as memory-free as the braided line on here, so I think it's really nice. Although I think that they're actually discontinuing it. I think I saw a post where that line wasn't going to be in production anymore. But I also use just cheap Berkeley Big Game 8 pound test, and then sometimes if I'm using fluorocarbon, I use the Trilene 100%, 6 pound, 8 pound. It just kind of depends on what type of structure I'm fishing. I tend to use more fluorocarbon whenever I'm tight lining without the bobber. Around, you know, brush, I feel like it's a little bit more abrasion resistant. But like I said, for the most part, I'm using monofilament as my leader. So now that we have the rod, the reel, the line taken care of, let's talk about the jig. This is everybody's favorite part of the system, right? So the jig of the year for us this year, or the plastic, has been the Bobby Garland Baby Shad. Now this is a super popular brand of crappie plastics. A lot of guys are using it. This is not a new bait, but this is something that I haven't really used a lot over the last few years, mainly just because I've grown up being primarily a crappie tube fisherman, like throwing 1.5 inch or 2 inch tubes, which those work phenomenally too, but I just wanted to kind of mix things up this year, and I started having a lot of success on this guy, and I think it's because of that little quivering tail action right there. It's just a nice little profile, looks like a little bait fish, and as y'all have seen, we've been just catching a ton of fish on the baby shads, and mainly throwing bait fish colors because the water has been pretty clear. So this color here is called Glacier. This is kind of like a pearl color, kind of got like a little bit of a red sheen to it with blue flake. But our number one this year has got to have been this guy right here. And I feel like this is probably the number one jig that I feel like everybody needs in their crappie tackle box, and that is a Bobby Garland Baby Shad in the color Monkey Milk. Like with that color, you really can't go wrong. It works great in clear water, works great in lightly stained water, and it's just another one that's pearl based, got a little bit of blue hue to it, and then little black flakes. And then as you can see, I've got both these jigs paired up with bright colored jig heads. I love contrasting the jig head to the body of the plastic, and I've had a lot of success throwing bright colors. So most of the time you're gonna see us using, you know, bright orange as our number one, bright pink is our number two, and if it's neither of those two, we're probably just throwing straight lead because we ran out of our colored jig heads, which lead works great too. But I prefer to have a bright orange jig head. Now, the size jig head that we've been using primarily out here is a 1/32 ounce. So that's about the lightest that I'll ever use crappie fishing. It's super light, especially when you pair it up with a bulky plastic like this. The bait falls super slow. So whenever you cast this bait out, the bobber hits the water first most of the time, and the bait just falls really slow down to whatever depth that you have it set to. And a lot of times those fish will bite it on that first fall. But also every time you move that bobber across the water, the jig rises up like this. And then when you pause it, it just glides back down. Nice and natural, nice and subtle. It's not too alarming. It makes it look like, you know, a defenseless little minnow, and the crappie just can't stand it. So this has been the jig of the year, but you can throw any plastic underneath your bobber, whatever your favorite is. We also have thrown a lot of tubes, a lot of like little gulp minnows, but all around, this has been our go-to. Little Bobby Garland Baby Shad in any of their bait fish colors, whether it's blue ice, glacier, monkey milk, straight pearl. Can't go wrong. But now I'm sitting out here, the water's a little bit muddier, so I probably would swap to more of like a chartreuse color or more of like a straight pearl body like this so they can see it a little bit better. Okay, so moving on up from the jig head and plastic, up the line we have another piece of equipment that is like super important to have if you want to fish, you know, shallow cover like this with all these snags around, and that is going to be your bobber. Like none of this is possible for us without a little bobber. And as y'all can see, I pretty much have the smallest bobber on here that you can get away with, and that is definitely by design. I like to use tiny little bobbers / strike indicators just because whenever you're casting them out, they don't cause as much of a ruckus on top of the water when they hit. It's a really light splash, and it almost kind of seems like, you know, like a natural sound of like a bait fish flickering or like just something falling off a tree into the water. So it's not gonna spook the fish, especially in clear water, especially in shallow water. So I like the smallest ones I can get. This is actually a trout magnet bobber, definitely my favorite bobber of all time. And you can float up to like a 16th ounce jig head underneath it. So if you bump it up to like an 1/8 ounce jig head, you're gonna have to use a bigger bobber. But these guys are compact, they're pretty aerodynamic, you can cast them a good long ways, so definitely recommend the trout magnet bobbers. Also, you can slip them right on and off. They have a slit groove right there if you decide you wanna take your bobber off and tight line. And without it having the clips, it doesn't damage your leader line. So I love little slip bobbers like this that you can take on and off. They also make some that are a little bit bigger, so if you want to float, you know, a heavier jig head, like I said, or say you're in a low light situation and you just can't really see that well, you can put a little bit larger size bobber, which y'all have definitely seen us do out here in the swamp this year. But yeah, that's the bobber, and I think that basically covers all of the gear that we have been using out here in the Cypress Tree Swamp this year for crappie fishing. I'll link it all down below for y'all to check out, just so you don't have to, you know, guess, and just to make sure that y'all are finding the right things. So one other thing I want to go over really quick before I get out of here and maybe try to find some fish is I want to go over like our retrieve on how we're catching these fish. So like I said, we're fishing shallow water around a bunch of trees. What you want to do, and this applies to anywhere, whether you're fishing out in a creek or fishing out in a lake and you're fishing a jig underneath the bobber, is you just want to cast your bait out. Let me just kind of pitch this thing out here. Okay, we're pitched out there. And what you want to do is you want your bait to hit the water, and then you just want to just twitch it. Just bring it, just twitch your rod and bring that bait forward a couple of feet each time. Or if you feel like you're in the strike zone, you know, just kind of just quiver it right in place so that tail of that bait or whatever plastic you're using is just getting a little bit of motion. You just want that bait to kind of just gently rise up and down in the water column, and just let it sit there and you know, and experiment with your cadence. You know, it's kind of like fishing a jerkbait for bass. Sometimes the fish want it to be really aggressive. Sometimes they want it to sit there in their face really still for a long time. There's been days out here where I've let my bait sit for like 20 seconds at a time before I've gotten bit, and it's like, it's painful to do, but it works often. But yeah, like I said, just cast it out there. Let it sit, let the jig sink all the way down the bottom or sink to its depth, and then just slowly just twitch it back to the boat. When the fish bites it, so a crappie, well, they'll try to demonstrate this. What they'll do is say, this is your jig. The crappie will nose up, and then they'll suck the jig in. So you'll see your bobber pop, and then the bobber will just slowly go down in most cases. And once it goes down, then you just lay it to them and flip them in the boat. I'm not really sure if that was a really good demonstration on a retrieve. I'm kind of got the camera up close to me, and then closer than I thought it was. But anyways, that's basically all we're doing. Experiment with depth. For the most part, I feel like whenever you're fishing a jig and bobber, you're fishing, you know, relatively shallow water, you know, less than 10 feet for sure. But normally, like I said, like 3 to 6 or 7 feet maybe. And where I like to start off at is to have the jig suspended halfway down in the water column, because crappie tend to suspend. You want the jig to be above them so they'll come up and get it. If you're fishing too deep, it can sometimes scare them, and they rarely will feed down on the jig, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you want your jig up here, the crappie's here, they come up and they eat it. That's how you want it. So start about halfway in the water column, and then maybe raise the jig up a little bit more than halfway. So the water we're fishing primarily is like 4 feet, so in the middle of 4 feet is 2 feet. We're fishing about 18 inches deep, so about 6 inches higher than halfway down in the water column is where we're starting at, and then we'll adjust accordingly. But yeah, so that right there is going to be the breakdown on how me and Jay are getting the job done out here in the shallow waters of the Cypress Tree Swamp this fall. Hopefully you're able to take something away from this video and apply it to your local fishery. So yeah, I'm going to let you guys go with all of that, and I'm going to maybe tool around out here and see maybe I could find a little school of fish. It's kind of slowed down out here. It's usually about the time of year when they start to move out of the shallow water and start heading to the deeper stuff. But we've been having such strange weather here in Arkansas. Like at the beginning of the week it'll be like 32, and the end of the week it'll be 80 degrees. It's super weird, but I'm really not complaining about it because it's kind of extended our fishing season. But yeah, hopefully, like I said, all this information was helpful for y'all, and I hope that y'all can get something out of it. So yeah, if y'all enjoyed today's video, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and Jay and I will be back with y'all again really soon for another crappie fishing or bass fishing or some other sort of fishing adventure. Take it easy, guys.